السيدات والسادة، رحبوا معنا بالأستاذ عدنان نواز من TRT World وأعضاء جلسته النقاشية.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from TRT World, Adnan Nawaz and his panel.
Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This session is called Investing in a Challenging World, and there'll be a very short introduction because time is tight and we have four very eminent panelists. So I'll just introduce them to you. Mr. Kwek Ping Yong is Chief Executive Officer of Inventus Investment Holdings. That's the largest private equity growth fund in China. Mr. Farouk A. Bastaki is Managing Director and Group Chief Executive Officer of the Kuwait Investment Authority. Mr. Mahmoud Al-Koheji is CEO of Mumtalakat, the sovereign wealth fund of the Kingdom of Bahrain, and Mr. Sheikh Abdullah bin Khalifa Al Khalifa, Chief Executive Officer of Usul here in Bahrain. Okay, let's begin with a question of philosophy, gentlemen. Mr. Bastaki, you, as the boss of the oldest sovereign wealth fund in the world, let's start with a question of what you think about even before you consider whether you're going to put any investment into any particular project. What are the key things that you have to tick off?
Good morning, everybody. The first thing is, of course, the risk. Our main goal is to protect the assets because we are literally managing the future generation money. So how much risk return? We establish a certain kind of return in mind with a certain risk, and then we choose the different asset classes and the geographies that you're going to invest that money. And we're talking about usually the next 10 years, how we're going to do that for the next 10 years.
Anybody else want to just make a contribution about your overall philosophy before we get into some more details?
Well, Mumtalakat is a sovereign wealth fund of Bahrain. Good morning, everybody. Nice to have you here in Bahrain. I think we do projects that are commercially viable. But before we go into that detail, we ask ourselves maybe two fundamental questions. Is this a growth area that we are contemplating to invest into it? And the second question is it going to affect people's life positively or not? That's very important for us because we invest in Bahrain and for Bahrain. So really, those are the non-financial questions we ask ourselves.
Don't forget to hold the microphone closer. I've just been given the instruction in my ear that I wasn't doing that. So, Sheikh Abdullah?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Adnan. So we manage money on behalf of pensions. So we're a long-term investor, and we have the luxury to put a strategic asset allocation that's long-term. We have the luxury to avoid all the noise that's what's going on. We don't prioritize short-term gains over long-term initiatives. So it's a very disciplined approach. Risk management plays a big part of it. It's important also to have a view, but that view is more of a tactical view. It doesn't compromise your long-term objectives.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have some roving microphones around the room, so if you have any questions for the panel, I will gladly take them starting from right now. So just raise your hands. Mr. Yong, the session is called, oh no, you carry on. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we are a 14 billion US dollar global fund based in Shanghai. For the last 5 years, our philosophy is always how can we link the world investment with China and with Asia. There's actually many challenges around this area. Then later on, I will elaborate more about that.
Okay, so the title of the session is Investing in a Challenging World. What is challenging about the world?
We have 100 challenges investing globally. I think maybe today I will just share about 3. The first one is our investment. How can we link all our investment, all our portfolio companies to the smartphone and the digital world? That's our first challenge, because traditionally we invest in very traditional business, but now we look into technologies more and more. The second challenge probably will be China is going to be a big import country. If you are not aware, this year China is going to be having their first import exhibition in Shanghai. So China is going to be a big buyer. So how can we help the Chinese company to make more purchases into China? The third challenges probably will be how can we supplement the Chinese strategy of One Belt, One Road. And we have separate fund in different regions. We have a Russian fund, and we started a Central Eastern Europe fund. And we are putting different funds into the One Belt, One Road region. That's another challenge.
Mr. Bastaki, you said that we could do the whole 25 minutes on this one question. Give me 90 seconds.
Well, we are investing globally in all geographies and all kinds of assets. I will say that the biggest risk or the major risk I see is the geopolitical risk that we see. We have the North Korea issue, we have the Iran nuclear issues, and the consequences to the decision that will be taken. The other thing is the cyber attacks, and if we're going to have a major attack on one of the central banks, what that's going to happen. These are binary risks. You cannot basically do any kind of hedging against them. There is a risk of rising interest rate, and people could switch from the equity to the safety of the treasury bond. There are several risks. The US-China trade war, how that can affect the market. So this is the things that keep us awake at night, basically.
Of course, stability is always something that you're searching for. Mr. Al-Khawaji, what about specific sectors? Is there something you're particularly attracted to at the moment or particularly investing in terms of specific sectors?
Yes, I think, as you know, Mumtalakat was established in 2006. Our model is we don't get funding from government. We have developed a self-sustained model. The sector that we have found to be very interesting for us, and we have invested into it, is two real main sectors: healthcare and education. And as I said earlier, because we want to touch the people, let me give you a couple of statistics. Healthcare, we think there's a huge growth in the healthcare sector. It touches the people, and by 2050, people who are above 60 will be 2 billion people. So there is a huge demand for healthcare sector. Education, it touches people directly. Every year of education, it adds 10% to the people's income. So these are the two sectors that we have invested into it, and we're looking at other sectors. As you mentioned, technology is a sector we are interested in. The sector that really grow but touches people as well. And for us, a story of growth is a real example. When Mumtalakat was established, we were 29 companies. Today, we are 60 companies. That shows how much we have self-grown our portfolio.
Sheikh Abdullah, how much is the game, if we can call it that, of investment one of future thinking? We've had Mr. Al-Khawaji tell us about specific sectors that Mumtalakat is looking at the moment, but how much is investment about what's going to happen in the next, say, 5 to 10 years? And are you looking at something in the future, or are you very much concentrating on what's right for right now?
No, definitely we look at opportunities both short term and long term. I guess the question is where is the quality deal flow that you see? And right now, we're fortunate to be a global investor. So if the deal flow is good outside, we chase it. If the deal flow is good inside and locally, regionally, we also chase it. So right now, I think there is a view that the private markets provide more alpha opportunities than the public markets, especially in things like infrastructure, real assets, and we've been actually chasing yields, chasing deals rather than chasing yield. And just as Sheikh Mohammed announced this morning, that we're establishing a $1 billion fund with Noga because of the quality of the deals that we see locally. We don't like to invest in black boxes anymore. We like to invest where we have visibility on cash flow high IRRs and long-term that meets the long-term liabilities that we have.
I'd encourage you to ask any questions to the panelists that you might have, and while we see if there are any, let's go on to, you want to say something?
I think, yeah, there was a question that was asked yesterday by the Sovereign Wealth Fund Institute, and it was addressed to the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and it's, why aren't you investing in the region? You know the region, you know your country, why you're not doing it? And I want to give the answer that for Mumtalakat, for the past 10 years, 60% of our investment have been in Bahrain. Only 40% have been elsewhere. So really, we are focused in the region, and we know the region, and I think it's a role that we are playing quietly. We're not announcing it, but 60% is in Bahrain.
Okay, actually, I'd like to pick up on that point because I feel that Bahrain is setting a certain standard for other countries in the region in terms of one specific issue, the role that the government plays in encouraging investment in the country. And there's one particular issue which I'm sure is important for all of you when considering investing abroad outside your home country. For you, this pertains specifically inside Bahrain, are transparency laws. It must be critical for you, I imagine. There was a survey recently done of C-level executives who work here in Bahrain for a group called the Oxford Business Group. 87% of those C-level executives here in the country said that there is a high level or relatively high level of transparency. So the issue is how much a government's role you consider will help you in making the decision to invest in a particular country. So we have, okay, Mr. Yong, you're nodding?
Definitely important for the government to help foreigner to pump in money into the region. But I always have one question when I look at GCC, because I'm also thinking very hard, how can I link GCC to Asia and to China? But I'm always thinking, does GCC region needs capital? Do we need capital? We have enough of capital, enough of money, then what else do we need here in this region? So maybe I could get a panelist to respond to this question.
Okay, listen, don't name a particular country, but are there countries where you're wary of investing because of a particular law that you're not happy with, say the lack of transparency? Does that happen to you, that you think A, B, C countries, we're not going there? Anyone?
We invest two funds, basically, or we manage two funds. One of them is the General Reserve Fund, and the other one is the Future Generation Fund. The General Reserve Fund is like a treasurer, also invests in the MENA region. The Future Generation is outside the MENA region, it invests globally. How we invest, basically depending on the GDP of the country. So US, you have more investment in the US because they are the largest GDP in the world. China 20, 30 years ago is different than China today. So because of that, you are increasing your investment in China and the emerging markets to keep up with their growth. So that's how we look at it. Plus, there is the other risk that I talk about that you have to be considering before you do your asset allocation.
Okay, that issue of GDP is very interesting because, Mr. Al-Khuwaiji, okay, you say something and then I'm going to give you some very interesting statistics. Go ahead.
Well, I think for us, transparency goes with corporate governance, and these are a very important topic. For us, we've been ranked 10 out of 10 for the third year in transparency because we want to put an example. Whenever we look at any investment, if they do not adhere to our values, we will not invest in them. It's very important to have corporate governance and transparency. If the country doesn't have those things, then that's an external factor that we cannot control. We shy away from it. We can control the investment we have. We're a long-term investors. We're equity house. So we can control the investment we make it, but the external factor is something that have to be helping us. Otherwise, there is no point of investing to those countries.
Okay, so these statistics, again, come from the same Oxford Business Group research because the Economic Development Board here in Bahrain projects GDP growth this year at 2.7%. But then those same C-level executives, 63% of them said they were very likely or highly likely to increase capital investment in their business significantly in the next 12 months. So there's something in between the lines there that they feel more confident about their business than the GDP, which is a fairly modest level of growth, would suggest is going to occur in the country. But, you know, Mr. Yong, is that just too woolly a basis on which to make an investment? Is business sentiment? Would you be looking more at GDP or specific sectors like Mumtalakat does?
We are looking for political stability and growth rate of private companies within the economic body. So that because our holding period is about 5 years. So we are forecasting a GDP of a company of a country or macro of a country for 5 years to 10 years. So that's more important than a single year of growth.
The relative independence of the private sector, again, is it something that you're particularly looking at? If we use Bahrain as an example, again, the laws that the country passes, like the recent law with a sandbox, you know, in terms of financial regulation, that kind of thing. I mean, how closely are you looking at the very latest developments that are coming from the top level of government, which are encouraging all of you to bring their money, your money, into a particular country? Is it really that important, or is it something that you think I can work around these issues?
Absolutely, it's very important. So, as an institutional investor, you look for public-private partnerships. So we have 2 investments in an IPP projects here where there are concession agreements with the government. The government decided to privatize its water and electricity production to private companies. So these sorts of partnerships where the government plays a role in being a regulator, but also has concession agreements with the private sector to mitigate the risk and basically give you the cash flow that you require.
Okay, Mr. Bastaki, this is an answer I'm glad I had the chance to ask, because in your work as the Executive Director of Alternative Investment at the Kuwait Investment Authority, I'd like you to tell us more about what alternative investment is.
Well, anything that is not listed is alternative. So we have private equity, we have real estate, we have hedge funds, and infrastructure also there. So we started our investment in the private equity. The first fund was in 1984, which is 35 years ago. That's ancient history because there wasn't a lot of private equity fund there. Today we have more than 200, 250 different funds all over the world. And they invest in all kinds of sectors, basically all kinds of geographies and sectors. Technology that was mentioned, certain sectors, we invest in technology through the public market. You know, you are in Apple, Google, Amazon because they are listed. So we are there. Also, we are in a number of funds, private equity funds that invest in technologies. We invest also directly in certain technologies, for example, alternative energy. We invested in fuel cell and a company called Bloom Energy. We invested in hydrogen fusion. I think the guys are here, that Tri-Alpha. We invested in a company called Proterra. They do electric buses. This is just an example of the, just the part of technology, alternative energy. And then you have funds that was early investor in like Facebook, Uber, Airbnb, and all these companies that were already involved. When they become an IPO, it goes to another sector.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before the next question, just don't forget the app, please, because the Gateway Gulf app is extremely useful in terms of telling you what's going on this, the second day of the forum, plus it allows you to connect with other people that you might want to meet and do business with. We encourage you to use social media, and then after this session later at lunchtime, that will be hosted by Kuwait, so you're welcome to that as well. We had a session just before us about fintech, about blockchain. How is technology affecting the way you make your decisions or the work that you do? So clearly we understand that you're investing in technology, but how do you use it as a tool? Has it made a big difference to your work in the past few years?
Well, I think technology, you cannot avoid it now, because I think it's a really so distractive to many sectors. Financial sector, as a session earlier, was one sector they're talking about it. But people don't think really how far technology goes. We have an investment in water treatment technology. So technology have gone even water treatment. We have a share in McLaren Automotive. A biggest unknown part of that is that they have a big applied research center that really applying technology to everyday's life experience. They have more than 700 engineers doing applied research technology. So it's an area that we think will be growing, and it's so disruptive, it's touching all sectors of life. I think nobody can avoid them. And that's why we have to be in technology.
But at the moment, Sheikh Abdullah, we were talking in the green room about the fact that your work is very much human-based decision-making at the moment. Is that going to change in the very near future?
Absolutely. So things like asset allocation and determining asset allocation. So when you run these scenarios, you can see AI now is taking over. And you can see the output of that is a very exact strategic asset allocation. And technology, as you go through the asset allocation, you see it everywhere. So as Farouk mentioned, in the public markets, our international public markets, our top 5 holdings are, the so-called FANG stocks. If you look at in the private equity, our technology venture partners, they are doing phenomenal things. So, like it or not, technology is in your asset mix. I guess the question is right now is it getting too expensive? And is it time for us to exit and recycle the money into something else? Or there is room for this valuation to grow?
Yes, Mr. Bastaki.
I would like to make a comment about answer your question. Using technology to invest is different than investing in technology. Think like Warren Buffett was considered by many the best investor in the world. He's doing it with a calculator, so he doesn't even use a personal computer. There is a lot of technology used for short-term trading. That's not our style, but you are giving money to certain fund manager who are using that technology. We don't have to use it ourselves, but we are, as I said, investing in the technology.
Mr. Yom? Okay. How much risk do you take, or is the very nature of your specific job something that makes you risk averse? Are there examples where you can share with us risk that is paid off?
My answer will be very simple. We try not to take risk. We're a very conservative organization. In our process, we really look at risk, and if there is a risk mitigation element, we adopt it. If there isn't, we do not take risk. We don't think as a sovereign wealth fund, we're an institution that we can take risk. We have a very great responsibility that this is the people's money we have. We work for the people of Bahrain, and we have to be careful how we invest our money.
Does that apply to all of you? That
We took a higher risk in 2000 to enter China. People talk to us, are you crazy? You're going to China to make investment. But at the end of the day, 18 years, fast forward, you see that it's kind of rewarding. We are adopting the similar approach by going to Russia, looking at Kazakhstan, and of course the GCC area. We want to be the first mover into investment in this region. It would pay off.
We would like to take risk when nobody else want to take risk. Today everything so expensive, and I don't see very interesting opportunities to go very heavily. In 2009, when nobody want to invest it, we did invest heavily, and it paid off very, very well today.
So we are in the business of taking risk. We have to take risk. Not taking risk is actually a failure from our end. The question is it calculated risk? Valuations and expensive markets, we could have said the same analogy 2 years ago. We could have missed one of the best 2 years in equity markets. So we're always in the market to invest. I guess the question is, we don't chase yield, and we don't take excessive risk short term to compromise our long term objectives.
Okay, I'm just going to do a quick turn to see if there are any hands. So you mentioned short term, longer term, and regarding the length of your investment that you're looking at, the returns that are potentially coming, are you particularly attracted to short, medium, long term? Does it make a difference in the way you look at a project in terms of when the return is going to eventually come?
We normally took about 5 years for our investment. So we invest, add value, and exit. That's about 5 years. And China, when we entered China, it was an emerging market. So it gives us very good, comfortable time range for that 5 years period.
Anybody else have a particular calculation that you always stick to, or does it vary?
No, I mean, we're a long-term investor. But I'd like to touch base on an earlier question you asked about. You know, I think EDB have been for a decade working in improving the business environment in Bahrain and improving it. And it's a long-term effort, but it's paying off. You know, the lessons are big. Amazon was announced last year. Mondelez was in Bahrain. Amazon chose Bahrain. Mondelez chose Bahrain. Muller International chose Bahrain because it provides the right business environment for doing business. So that effort that they're doing, it is a long term, but it really creates the foundation for us to be able to attract businesses and set them here. The work they're doing is very crucial to lay the ground for us. And it is something that they need to be appreciated from the effort they're doing it.
Okay, I think what's been particularly interesting is that we're discussing your philosophy when regarding these huge investments that you're making. Some of the sessions that we've had here at the forum have been very specific about opportunities that are available. But if we talk more about your philosophy in terms of whether you prefer sort of public-private partnerships, would you prefer everything to be as private as possible? Is there a distinction that you can make when considering investments? I mean, do you have a preference, any of you?
We try to be as private as possible.
Why?
We can control everything.
Yes. And does that mean that...
Of course, we need the government's support, but we try to be as private as possible. And everything is within our control. Yes.
Okay, I want to come back to that, but does that also apply to a sovereign wealth fund like yours?
Yes, because I think we have our criteria, corporate governance, transparency. If they are happy to adopt our criteria, we don't mind who we're dealing with it. They have to adopt to our philosophy and our criteria. And I think that is very important that, whenever we look at any businesses, we see, is there a match? Do they believe in our philosophies? Otherwise, it should be a big problem in the future. To me, it doesn't matter whether it is public or private. As long as we are thinking alike, then I think that would make a good recipe for investment.
Ms. Young, that's really interesting that you want to control everything. I can understand that because, of course, the decisions, therefore, are yours. Success, failure, whatever happens. But does that mean that there are places that you are more wary of, or you'd prefer things to change in particular places before you go there? Are there places where you simply can't have the control that you want to have?
We have to follow the local regulations and rules. For our investment in Asia are mainly minority investment. So when I say I control everything, it's that we have a say to how we're going to manage our portfolios. But the company is still running by the existing management.
Mr. Basaki, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, to us, we use managers. We have external fund managers, we have funds, so the question of controlling everything is not there. We have criteria, so if the fund manager can fit those criteria, we invest with them, but we are not waiting for them to call us for every question or what they want to do. We have this like general partner, limited partner approach, or we make sure that you have the expertise and then we let you do your business.
You'd mentioned the issue of geopolitics being one of the challenges in the world. And it's a question again for all of you, but how much do you consider, in terms of the geopolitics, how much regional cooperation there may be? Let's say you choose country A, it's part of some kind of free trade agreement. It could be NAFTA, it could be the European Union, it could be another one. How much do you consider the regional cooperation that might take place in that area. And I imagine that's one of the things that makes the EU attractive, is the regional cooperation that happens between 27 countries. What are you considering in that respect?
The way I understand the question, if we mix in the politics with the investment, we're not doing that, but just a risk. We think about it as a risk as anybody else will think about it from our region or outside our region. These geopolitical risks that I'm talking about will affect every investor. It's not particular to people in our region or not. So we think about, if this happens, what are the consequences? And then you determine how much you want to invest because of that. That part of it, but you cannot hedge it. Again, it's binary. You don't know if something going to happen or not. So we just have it in mind all the time.
Anyone else?
So, just as Farouk mentioned, we have the luxury to claim to be a long-term investor. So, this is all noise for us. Yes, the risk premium can change in the short term, but eventually, for us, it's noise. As long as you have a clear mandate, clear strategy, a clear asset allocation, and you adhere to that, then I think you're fine.
I think we live in a turbulent world. You cannot look in any region without being some conflict. It's something you have to live with it. It's something you have to factor into your criteria, and you have to do it. As a long-term investor, even if I make a decision that is okay today, it could be turbulent in the future. So we have to factor that in, and we have to continue doing investment, taking that into consideration. It's not related to this region, other region, it's over the globe.
But are free trade agreements something that would be beneficial to the way you invest, or does it not particularly make a difference? You could go to a standalone country that isn't cooperating with anybody else, but has something that you're particularly attracted to. And that's just the only thing you're going to look at, is that specific investment you want to make.
For us, I think that's not something that we look for. I guess we have an investment process. We have asset managers that we work with. We have partners that we work for, and I think we execute depending on their guidelines. So there are free trade agreements between here and somewhere else. That's something good. However, it doesn't affect my investment decision.
Okay, so we've got about 4 minutes. So there are 4 of you, so I'll give you 1 minute each to just tell me, as the bosses of your companies, what can we find instructive from your experience in your job that will give us an overview to a session about investing in a challenging world? What you found sitting at your desk and the things that come your way that you have to make decisions about. Shall we start with you, Sheikh Abdullah?
I think it's important to be disciplined. It's important to have a process. It's important to have a view, and it's important to have a strategy. And I think if you have a clear mandate and you implement on that strategy with your view, I think you should be fine long term.
Mr. Al-Khawaji.
For me, I think I always sit down and think, what are we doing for our stakeholder, the people of Bahrain? The numbers, we have team who can do the numbers, but what we are creating for the Bahrainis, in Bahrain or for Bahrain, out of Bahrain. Really, what are we achieving for our stakeholder, for the Bahraini people? To me, that's very important. I was looking at some of the statistics. We have 30 companies in Bahrain. We employ 14,000 jobs. We have 395 financial institutions that employ the same number of people. To me, I look at that, it gives me satisfaction that we are creating jobs, we are adding value for the people of Bahrain, for the people as a whole. We are making a better life for people. That is something I need to focus on. And I read the numbers for my team.
Interesting. Mr. Bastaki?
Well, I will say that you have to define your criteria, do your research, think about the long term, keep emotion out of it, don't be reactions, like something comes in the news, don't make a decision on that immediately, give it some time, because we found out, things could be totally different what you think, you just wait and see what happens. Think about it, and think for the long term again. Think what's going to happen in 10 years, not in 2 hours.
We like challenges. I think the highest the challenges, the highest the rewards.
Okay, short and sweet. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank the panel and thank you very much indeed for listening.